movie begins with a family living in a peaceful neighborhood. They suddenly notice their neighbors acting strangely and running around in panic. Confused, the family went to the street, only to see everyone leaving town. Unsure of what was going on, they quickly packed their belongings and joined the exodus out of the city. When they reached the edge of town, they discovered the government had blocked the only exit and ordered everyone to return to their homes and await instructions. While they were still processing the events, 2 fighter jets emerged from behind the mountain and dropped incendiary bombs on the town without warning. The entire area burst into flames, leaving everyone horrified. The jets then turned in their direction, causing mass panic. People scattered in every direction. Claire remembered a little-known shelter in the mountains, so they made their way there. Just as they reached the shelter, the jets returned and dropped more bombs. The family barely managed to close the door in time, as an explosion shook the area above them. Inside the shelter, they discovered it was stocked with daily necessities, sufficient for a couple of months. They had no idea what was happening outside, but survival became their priority. Days turned into weeks, and eventually, a year passed. The family adapted to life in the shelter, securing the entrance with chains and avoiding the outside world, which was now overrun by an unknown menace. They believed they might be the only survivors. Zoe often used a periscope to peek outside through a vent. One day, she noticed movement in the distant forest. Her parents were out searching for supplies, and she shouted to warn them, but they couldn't hear her. Despite being warned not to leave the shelter, Zoe disobeyed and went outside to find her parents. However, they were nowhere to be seen. Frantically calling for them, she was startled when Claire suddenly appeared and covered her mouth to keep her quiet. The sound in the forest turned out to be a group of frightened deer, which offered brief relief. But Claire realized the deer were likely fleeing something even more dangerous. They hurried back to the shelter and locked the entrance with thick iron chains. Soon, they heard footsteps above them, pacing back and forth. Suddenly, there was a loud crash at the entrance, and something began trying to break in. Zoe accidentally caused her doll to make a loud noise, drawing the intruder's attention. Ray quickly destroyed the doll to silence it, but it was too late, and the creature had heard them. It began pounding violently on the iron door, which strained under the pressure. Claire tried to reinforce the door with her weight, but it wasn't enough. The door began to open, revealing a pair of glowing yellow eyes in the darkness. Ray rushed in with an iron rod and managed to fend off the creature, giving them just enough time to secure the door again. However, their actions seemed to anger the creature, which summoned others. The deafening sound of approaching footsteps shook the shelter as more creatures arrived. The family retreated deeper into the shelter, but there was no escape. Zoe noticed a vent they could use to escape. Ray helped Claire climb out first, and then she pulled Zoe to safety. When Ray tried to follow, his shoulders were too wide and he got stuck. As the monsters closed in, Ray made the painful decision to break his arm to squeeze through. Just as he was almost free, a monstrous hand grabbed his ankle and dragged him back. In his final moments, Ray shouted to Claire and Zoe to run for their life before he was pulled down into the shelter. They heard horrifying screams and the sound of a fierce struggle. Blood spurted out, and then everything fell silent. Grieving, but knowing they had to survive, Claire grabbed Zoe and fled into the forest. After escaping through the forest, Claire and Zoe reached the town where they had first tried to flee. The area was now completely destroyed. High walls had been built around it, with quarantine warnings posted everywhere. As they moved cautiously, a helicopter suddenly appeared above them. Its searchlights lit up the area, exposing Claire and Zoe with nowhere to hide. The helicopter dropped a net, trapping them. Struggling desperately to escape, they noticed the creatures were now closing in. However, it became clear these weren't monsters at all. They were armed soldiers in biohazard suits. The soldiers removed their yellow night vision goggles and signaled the helicopter to continue searching for other survivors. One soldier then approached Claire and Zoe to take blood samples. After testing their blood, the soldier was visibly disappointed. The results showed that Claire and Zoe were already infected with a virus, turning their blood black, a clear sign of contamination. It turned out that during the early stages of the disaster, they had been exposed to airborne viruses. For years, they had been hiding, not from monsters, but from soldiers tasked with eliminating infected individuals. As the soldiers prepared to kill them, Claire, driven by a primal instinct to protect her child, began to transform. Her eyes turned bloodshot, and the infection spread visibly across her body, altering her appearance. Just as the soldiers aimed their weapons, Ray, now mutated as well, suddenly appeared and attacked them. His transformation had enhanced his strength, allowing him to overpower the soldiers in seconds. Despite his strength, Ray couldn't withstand the barrage of bullets. He fought valiantly to protect his family, but was eventually killed. His sacrifice, however, gave Claire and Zoe enough time to escape. By now, the infection had taken full control of Claire and Zoe. They lost all traces of their humanity, attacking the remaining soldiers with ferocity. After the last soldier was defeated, they regained their senses and returned to their human forms. At the end, the surviving soldiers, who had removed their protective gear, began to show signs of infection from the airborne virus. Claire and Zoe, now fully aware of their condition, ran to the forest and stumbled upon other infected survivors like themselves.